The diagnosis. The fluorescent lights of St. Mary's Hospital flickered above Emma's head as she sat in the sterile waiting room, her fingers trembling against the worn armrest of the plastic chair. At 23, she should have been planning her future, maybe falling in love, building a career. Instead, she was waiting to hear how much time she had left. Emma Richardson? The nurse's voice cut through her spiraling thoughts. She stood on shaky legs, smoothing down her faded jeans. Her mother would have wanted to be here, but Emma had insisted on coming alone. Some battles, she thought, you had to face by yourself. Dr. Peterson's office smelled like antiseptic and old coffee. He was a kind man in his 50s with graying hair and eyes that had seen too much suffering. When he looked up from her file, Emma already knew. She'd seen that expression before, 6 months ago when they'd first found the tumor, and again 3 months ago when the first treatment failed. Emma, he began gently, I'm afraid the cancer has progressed more aggressively than we anticipated. The words that followed washed over her like a cold wave. Stage 4. Metastasized. 6 months, maybe a year with aggressive treatment. The numbers and medical terms blurred together, but the message was crystal clear. Her fairy tale was ending before it had really begun. Is there anything else we can do? She heard herself ask, her voice sounding distant and strange. Dr. Peterson's pause told her everything. We can try experimental treatments, but I have to be honest with you. The likelihood of success is very low. The side effects would be severe, and it would consume whatever time you have left. Emma walked out of that hospital in a daze. The autumn sun felt too bright. The city sounds too loud. People rushed past her on the sidewalk, absorbed in their mundane problems, their ordinary lives. They had no idea how precious ordinary was. She found herself at her favorite bookstore without consciously deciding to go there. The small shop on Fifth Avenue had been her sanctuary since childhood. Between these dusty shelves, she'd lived 1,000 lives, loved 100 heroes, survived countless adventures. Reality had always felt too heavy for Emma, so she'd learned to carry it by balancing it with stories. Bad day, sweetheart? Mrs. Chen, the elderly owner, peered at her over reading glasses. Emma managed a weak smile. You could say that. She wandered to the romance section, her fingers trailing across familiar spines. All those happily ever afters, all those promises of true love and forever. She'd spent her life believing in them, waiting for her own story to begin. But fairy tales, she was learning, were for people who had time. That night, alone in her small apartment, Emma made a decision. She wasn't going to spend her remaining months in hospitals, pumped full of chemicals that would steal whatever quality of life she had left. If she only had one chapter remaining, she was going to write it her way. The Prince in Disguise. The charity gala wasn't Emma's usual scene, but her best friend Sarah had insisted. You need to live, really live, not just exist. So here she was, wearing a borrowed dress that cost more than her rent, feeling like Cinderella at a ball she hadn't been invited to. The grand ballroom of the Waldorf Astoria glittered with crystal chandeliers and champagne flutes. Women in designer gowns laughed too loudly, their jewelry catching the light. Men in expensive suits talked about stock options and vacation homes. Emma felt invisible, which suited her fine. She'd come to make Sarah happy, but she didn't belong here. She was sipping sparkling water. Alcohol didn't mix well with her medications when she saw him. He stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, separated from the crowd, looking out at the Manhattan skyline with an expression of profound loneliness. Even in his perfectly tailored tuxedo, he seemed out of place, like he was wearing a costume. Something about the sadness in his eyes called to her. Before she could second-guess herself, Emma walked over. The view's better from this angle, she said, positioning herself to see both the skyline and his reflection in the glass. He turned, startled, and she got her first real look at him. He was handsome, devastatingly so, with dark hair that fell carelessly across his forehead and eyes the color of a winter storm. But it was the surprise in his expression that struck her. Like he'd forgotten people could still see him. Is it? He asked, the corner of his mouth lifting slightly. Well, from here you can see the city and imagine all the stories happening in each window. All those lives being lived. You're a storyteller? A reader, mostly. Though I used to dream of being a writer. Emma surprised herself with the honesty. There was something about this stranger that made pretense feel pointless. Used to? She shrugged, the question too complicated to answer. What about you? What brings you to this spectacle of wealth and privilege? He laughed, a real laugh that transformed his serious face. Obligation. My family has certain expectations. They talked for hours, or what felt like hours. His name was Alexander, though he asked her to call him Alex. He didn't volunteer a last name, and she didn't ask. In the bubble they'd created by that window, last names and backgrounds didn't matter. He was different from anyone she'd ever met. Educated at schools she'd only read about, traveled to places she'd only dreamed of, yet somehow fundamentally lonely in a way she understood. Behind his cultured exterior, she sensed a kindred spirit, someone else who felt like a character in the wrong story. "You're different from the others here," he said eventually, his voice low. "I don't belong here," Emma admitted. "I'm just visiting from the real world." "Maybe I don't belong either. Maybe we're both just visiting." When he asked for the truth about Alexander, Alex didn't call for 3 days. Emma filled the time with doctor's appointments she could no longer avoid, with Sarah's worried hovering, with the crushing weight of regret. She'd ruined it, the one beautiful thing in her abbreviated life, and she destroyed it with her cowardice. On the fourth day, her doorbell rang at 7 a.m. She opened it to find Alex standing there, looking like he hadn't slept. Behind him stood a man in a dark suit and sunglasses, a bodyguard. "Can we talk?" Alex asked. Emma nodded, suddenly conscious of her ratty pajamas and unmade-up face. The bodyguard remained outside as Alex came in. "I owe you an explanation," he said without preamble. "About who I am. About why I need to tell you something that's going to change everything." He took a breath. "My full name is Alexander James Worthington III. My family owns Worthington Industries. We're in pharmaceuticals, medical equipment, hospitals. We're one of the wealthiest families in America." Emma felt the ground shift beneath her feet. Worthington. She knew that name. Everyone knew that name. They were American royalty, their faces on magazine covers, their business deals moving markets. "Why didn't you tell me?" "For the same reason you didn't tell me about the cancer. I wanted something real. Something that wasn't about the money or the name or the expectations." He moved closer. "When I met you, you looked at me like I was just a person. Not a Worthington, not a prize, not a business opportunity. Just me. I hadn't felt that in years. So we were both lying. We were both protecting something precious." He took her hands. "Emma, I've spent the last 3 days talking to every oncologist my family knows. I've had them review your case, your scans, everything. Alex, there's an experimental treatment. It's being developed at a research facility in Switzerland. Early trials are showing promise for exactly your type of cancer." Hope flared in her chest, painful and dangerous. "Alex, I can't afford." "You don't need to. I'm covering everything. The treatment, the travel, the best doctors in the world. Everything." Emma pulled away. "I can't let you do that." "Why not?" "Because it's too much. Because we've only known each other for 2 months." "Because?" "Because you love me too," he said quietly. "And that terrifies you." She couldn't deny it. She'd fallen completely, irreversibly in love with him, which made this hurt even more. "This isn't a fairy tale," she said. "You can't just throw money at the problem and make it disappear." "I know that. Believe me, I know that." His voice was rough with emotion. "But I have resources you don't. I have access to treatments and trials that aren't available to the public yet. Why wouldn't I use that? Why wouldn't I fight for you with every weapon I have? What if it doesn't work? Then at least we tried. Together." He cupped her face in his hands. "You don't get to make this decision alone anymore. You don't get to sacrifice yourself without giving me a chance to save you. This isn't how it's supposed to work. The princess saves herself. Or maybe," he interrupted gently, "maybe the prince and the princess save each other." Emma wanted to argue, but exhaustion and hope and love were warring inside her, and she didn't have the strength to fight all three. "What if I can't be saved? Then we make whatever time you have left count. We fill it with everything you've ever dreamed of. We live a lifetime in 6 months." His eyes were fierce. "But first, we try. We fight. And if that makes me Prince Charming, then so be it." A different kind of battle. The research facility in Switzerland looked nothing like the sterile hospitals Emma was used to. Nestled in the Alps, surrounded by snow-capped mountains and pristine lakes, it looked more like a luxury resort than a medical center. "Welcome to the Hoffman Institute," Dr. Elena Volkov said, greeting them warmly. She was a brilliant Russian oncologist who'd pioneered the treatment Alex had found. "We're going to take very good care of you." The treatment was grueling. The experimental drug therapy was combined with targeted radiation, immunotherapy, and a host of other interventions that left Emma exhausted and sick. But it was different from traditional chemotherapy. More precise. More hopeful. Alex stayed with her through everything. When she was too nauseous to eat, he brought her ice chips and held her hair. When the pain was bad, he read to her from her favorite books, his voice a lifeline to consciousness. When she was scared, he held her hand and reminded her that fairy tales required trials before the happy ending. "Tell me a story," she whispered one night after a particularly bad day. "What kind of story?" "Any kind. Just take me somewhere else." He thought for a moment, then began. "Once upon a time, there was a prince who lived in a tower of gold. He had everything: wealth, power, privilege. But he was desperately lonely. The world saw him as a prize to be won, a connection to be made, a deal to be struck. No one saw him as just a person." "Sounds familiar," Emma murmured. One day, the prince escaped to a ball where no one knew his name. And there, by a window overlooking the kingdom, he met a girl who saw him. Really saw him. She looked past the costume and the crown and saw the person underneath. And for the first time in his life, he felt real. What happened to them? The girl was sick. She was fighting a dragon that lived inside her, a dragon that was trying to steal her away. The prince wanted to save her, but she was stubborn and brave and insisted on fighting the dragon herself. She sounds foolish. She was scared. She'd spent her whole life believing in fairy tales, but when it came time to live one, she didn't think she deserved it. Alex kissed her forehead, but the prince loved her anyway. And together, they're fighting the dragon. And they're going to win. You don't know that. Yes, I do. Because this is our story, and we get to write the ending. As weeks turned into months, something remarkable happened. Emma started to get better. The tumors were shrinking. Her energy was returning. The aggressive cancer that had been given her a death sentence was responding to treatment. Dr. Volkov was cautiously optimistic. "We're seeing unprecedented results. Your body is responding beautifully to the therapy." But with health came complications Emma hadn't anticipated. The outside world, which had faded during her illness, came roaring back. The price of fairy tales. The first article appeared in a tabloid. Worthington Heirs mystery woman revealed. There was a photo of them leaving the institute, Emma in a wheelchair, Alex beside her. Within days, her life exploded. Paparazzi camped outside the facility. Reporters dug into her background, publishing stories about her modest upbringing, her mother's job as a waitress, her father's death when she was 12. They called her a gold digger, a social climber, a nobody trying to trap a billionaire. "I'm so sorry," Alex said, his jaw tight as he read the latest headline. "I should have protected you better." "How could you have known?" "Because this is my world. This is what happens when Worthingtons fall in love. I should have warned you." But the media attention was just the beginning. Alex's family was next. His mother, Patricia Worthington, arrived at the institute like a force of nature, impeccably dressed, diamond-hard, radiating disapproval. "Alexander, may I speak with you?" "Privately." Emma tried to give them space, but Patricia's voice carried through the door. "This is unacceptable. You're making a spectacle of yourself over some girl. Her name is Emma. I don't care what her name is. She's completely unsuitable. She has no family, no education, no breeding. And she's ill. Do you have any idea what the board will say if you continue this? Dalliance? I love her." "Love?" Patricia's laugh was cruel. "Darling, you're a Worthington. Love is a luxury we can't afford. You have responsibilities to the company, to the family name, to your future. My future is with Emma." Emma heard footsteps, then Patricia's voice, colder now. "She's using you, Alexander. Can't you see that? A poor dying girl suddenly gets access to the best medical care money can buy. And you think that's love?" The accusation hit Emma like a physical blow. Was that what people thought? That she was using Alex? She waited until Patricia left, storming past Emma without acknowledgement, before confronting the wedding. They decided to marry quickly, before Emma's health could take another turn, before the media circus could get worse, before the family could mount a more organized resistance. The wedding was small, just Sarah and a few close friends. held in a chapel in the Swiss mountains with the Alps as witnesses. Emma wore a simple white dress, Alex in dark suit. They wrote their own vows. I was dying when I met you, Emma said, her voice steady despite her tears. Not just physically, but in all the ways that matter. I'd given up on my own story. And then you walked into my life and reminded me that fairy tales aren't about perfect circumstances. They're about choosing to believe in magic even when the world tells you not to. You're my magic, Alexander Worthington. You're the part of the story I never dared to write. Alex's voice was thick with emotion as he spoke. I was trapped in a tower of expectations when I met you. I had everything except the one thing that mattered, someone who saw me. Really saw me. You made me brave enough to write my own story instead of living the one written for me. Whatever comes next, whatever dragons we have to fight, whatever obstacles we face them together. This is our fairy tale, Emma. And I promise you, it's going to have a happy ending. When they kissed, Emma felt the last piece of her old life fall away. She wasn't the sick girl anymore. She wasn't the poor girl from Queens. She was Emma Worthington, married to the love of her life, with a future spreading out before her like pages in an unwritten book. But fairy tales, even the real ones, require trials. 9 months into their marriage, Emma felt the familiar fatigue creeping back. At first, she told herself it was stress. They'd moved to New York. She was trying to find her place in Alex's world. The media scrutiny hadn't let up. But deep down, she knew. The dragon was back. It's a recurrence, Dr. Peterson said gently, back in the same office where this had all begun. The cancer has returned. It's in your lymph nodes now. Emma felt Alex's hand tighten around hers. What are our options? We can try another round of the experimental treatment, but the likelihood of it working twice as low. We could pursue more aggressive chemotherapy, radiation. What are the odds? Emma asked. Dr. Peterson's pause was answer enough. That night, Emma and Alex sat in their penthouse apartment overlooking Central Park, the city lights twinkling like false stars. We fight, Alex said. We go back to Switzerland. We try the treatment again. Alex, we use every resource we have. I'll call Dr. Volkov. I'll fund new research, whatever it takes. Alex. Emma took his face in her hands. We knew this might happen. We always knew. No. His voice broke. No, we beat it once. We can beat it again. Maybe. Or maybe. She took a breath. Maybe we have a different kind of fight ahead of us. What does that mean? It means we make the time we have count. Really count. Not just surviving, but living. Over the next few weeks, they tried everything. Back to Switzerland for another round of treatment, but this time Emma's body didn't respond. The cancer was more aggressive, more resistant. The doctors were running out of options. How long? Emma asked Dr. Volkov privately. 6 months. Maybe less. Emma had thought hearing that prognosis once was the hardest thing she'd ever done. Hearing it a second time, now that she had so much more to lose, was unbearable. But she'd learned something important during her time with Alex. Courage wasn't about not being afraid. It was about choosing how to spend your time despite the fear. Living the fairy tale. Let's make a list, Emma said one morning, 3 months after the recurrence. A list of what? Everything I want to do. Everything I've dreamed about. Let's do it all. So they did. They went to Paris, where they walked along the Seine and kissed under the Eiffel Tower. They visited the bookshop Shakespeare and Company, where Emma bought armfuls of novels and Alex pretended to complain about carrying them. They went to Japan during cherry blossom season, the pink petals falling around them like snow. Emma wore a kimono and felt like a character in one of her beloved stories. They returned to the grand ballroom of the Waldorf Astoria, to the spot where they'd first met. I knew, Alex said. The moment I saw you. I knew you were going to change my life. I was so scared that night, Emma confessed. I almost didn't come. I'm glad you did. I'm glad you were brave. They visited Emma's mother in Queens, a reconciliation that had been long overdue. Mrs. Richardson had been hurt by Emma's disappearance into Alex's world, but seeing her daughter happy, truly happy, had softened her. He's good to you? Her mother asked while Alex was in the other room. He's everything, Emma said simply. Then that's all that matters. They started a foundation, the Emma Richardson Worthington Cancer Research Fund, dedicated to making experimental treatments accessible to everyone, not just the wealthy. It was Emma's idea, born from her guilt over the resources she'd had access to that others didn't. Everyone deserves their fairy tale, she said. Not just the privileged. But the best days were the quiet ones. Mornings in bed, Alex reading to her from the newspaper. Afternoons in Central Park, feeding the ducks. Evenings cooking together in their kitchen, making a mess and laughing. I need to tell you something, Alex said one night as they lay tangled together. What? I'm scared. I'm terrified of losing you. And I don't know how to be brave about it. Emma pulled him closer. You don't have to be brave. You just have to be here. That's all I need. It's not enough. It's everything. But time, as it always does, kept moving forward. Emma knew she was dying. Not in the abstract way she'd known it before, but in the concrete, undeniable way of a body shutting down. She'd stopped treatment. Not because they'd run out of options. Alex would have funded experiments until the end of time. But because she was tired. Tired of fighting, tired of hurting, tired of the drugs and the procedures and the false hope. I want to go home, she told Alex. We are home. No, I want to go to the bookstore. Mrs. Chen's bookstore. So he took her there, Emma wrapped in blankets, impossibly fragile. Mrs. Chen cried when she saw her, then made tea and fussed over her like she had when Emma was a child. You found your happy ending, the old woman said, looking between Emma and Alex. I did, even if. Especially because of, Emma corrected gently. They spent hours there, Emma surrounded by books, Alex reading to her. All her favorite stories, the ones she'd turned to when reality was too hard. But now they felt different. Now she understood that the happy endings weren't about living forever. They were about loving completely. That night, back in their apartment, Emma couldn't sleep. The pain was bad, despite the medications. Alex held her, his own tears soaking into her hair. I'm not ready, he whispered. I'm not ready to lose you. I know. I'm not ready either. We were supposed to have more time. We beat it once. We should have had years, decades. We had this. Emma interrupted. We had a fairy tale. How many people can say that? It's not enough. It has to be. She turned in his arms to face him. Alex, listen to me. You gave me everything. You gave me hope when I'd given up. You gave me love when I thought I was unlovable. You gave me a story worth living. That's more than enough. What am I supposed to do without you? Live. Really live. Not the life your family expects, but the life you want. And remember that I loved you. I loved you with everything I had. As dawn broke over Manhattan, Emma's breathing became labored. Alex called for the doctors, but they both knew there was nothing left to do. Tell me a story, Emma whispered. Through his tears, Alex began. Once upon a time, there was a girl who believed in magic. She was told she was dying, that her story was ending, but she refused to accept that. She kept believing, kept hoping, kept loving. And she met a prince who was just as lost as she was. Did they live happily ever after? They lived truly ever after. They loved completely, fought bravely, and filled their abbreviated time with more life than most people experience in a century. And when the girl's story ended, the prince carried her memory forward, making sure her belief in magic never died. That's a good ending, Emma murmured, her eyes closing. It's a beautiful ending, Alex agreed, his voice breaking. But not the end of her story. Because stories like hers, they live forever. In the hearts of everyone she touched, in the foundation that bears her name, in the love that changed everything. Emma's hand squeezed his one last time. I love you, Prince Charming. I love you, my brave princess. As the sun rose over the city, Emma Richardson Worthington took her last breath, surrounded by books and love and the man who'd made her believe in fairy tales again. 5 years later, Alex stood in front of the Emma Richardson Worthington Center for Cancer Research, watching as they unveiled the statue in the courtyard. Emma, captured in bronze, sitting with a book in her lap, a slight smile on her face. The center had grown beyond anything they'd imagined. Funded by the Worthington fortune and run by the best minds in oncology, it provided experimental treatments to patients regardless of their ability to pay. Hundreds of people were alive because of Emma's vision, because of her belief that everyone deserved their fairy tale. She would have loved this, Sarah said, standing beside him. She'd become the center's director, channeling her own grief into action. She would have been embarrassed by all the attention, Alex corrected with a sad smile. But proud. Definitely proud. Alex touched the bronze book and statue Emma's hands. On it was inscribed a quote from their wedding vows. Fairy tales aren't about perfect circumstances. They're about choosing to believe in magic, even when the world tells you not to. He visited the statue every week, sometimes reading to it from Emma's favorite books, sometimes just sitting in silence. People had initially thought it strange, the billionaire having one-sided conversations with a statue, but they'd come to accept it. It was, in its way, a fairy tale of its own. The prince who never stopped loving his princess. Patricia Worthington had softened in the years since Emma's death. She'd never admitted she'd been wrong about Emma, but she'd become the foundation's largest private donor after Alex. Emma would have wanted this, was all she said. The center had just announced a breakthrough, a new treatment protocol based on the therapy that had given Emma her extra years. Early trials were showing remarkable success. "We're calling it the Richardson Protocol," Dr. Volkov told Alex during the dedication ceremony. "Because Emma was our first success. She proved it could work. She gave us hope." That night, alone in the penthouse he could never bring himself to leave, Alex pulled out his journal. He'd started writing after Emma died, filling pages with memories, with stories, with the life they'd shared. He'd published some of it, a book called Trading Life for Fairy Tales, with all proceeds going to the foundation. It had become a bestseller, not because of his name, but because Emma's story resonated. The girl who'd believed in magic, who'd fought a dragon and won love even while losing her battle with cancer. "I miss you," Alex wrote, "every day. But I'm doing what you asked. I'm living. Really living. I left the family business to run the foundation full-time. Mom nearly had a heart attack, but I think even she understands now. This is my purpose. Helping others find their fairy tales." He paused, looking out at the city lights. "I've started dating again. Her name is Michelle. She's a teacher. You'd like her. She reminds me of you in some ways. Kind, brave, believes in the goodness of people. I'm not in love with her. Not like I was with you. But she makes me happy. And I think that's what you want." The words kept flowing. "Sometimes I wonder if our story was a fairy tale or a tragedy. But then I remember what you said, that the best stories are both. They're beautiful and heartbreaking and real. We had 2 years together. Just 2 years. But they were the best years of my life. You made me believe in magic. You made me believe in love. You saved me just as much as I tried to save you." He closed the journal and went to bed, Emma's side of the bed still untouched. He'd kept it that way, along with her books, her clothes, all the little pieces of her that remained. In the morning, he'd go back to the center. He'd meet with patients, review research, make decisions about funding. He'd live the life Emma had wanted for him, one of purpose, of meaning, of making sure her belief in fairy tales helped others write their own stories. Because that was the thing about fairy tales, Alex had learned. They weren't about living forever. They were about living fully, loving completely, and leaving the world better than you found it. Emma had done all three. And in the end, wasn't that the happiest ending of all? The end.